In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Thank you all for joining us today. This is Father Simon Dawood here in the diocese in San Antonio. I, first of all, will send the regards and the regrets of our fathers, the bishops, and by Youssef, and by Basil, and by Gregory. They're unable to be with us today. It seems that this is the season of love, and all three of our fathers, the bishops, are at a wedding now. So they've asked me to coordinate this meeting. We extend our thanks, of course, to Dr. George Bassilios. He is the well-known author of the book, Timeless Truth for Truthless Times. He's been gracious enough to accept our invitation to the diocese here to talk to us about this extremely important topic of how to protect our children in an over-sexualized society. And so without too much delay, I'll hand the floor to Dr. George Bassilios. A quick reminder of some of the administrative items that we know and that we're familiar with. The meeting today will be, the presentation today will be in English, God willing. We are planning to have a real-time translation to Arabic. We're waiting for our translator to connect. As soon as he connects, we'll enable the translation. When that happens, you should see a small globe icon that says interpretation. If you want to hear the Arabic translation, you'll click this globe and set it to Arabic. If you want to listen to the English, you don't need to do anything. The English will be broadcast normally. احنا ان شاء الله يبقى عندنا ترجمة مباشرة. احنا بس مستنيين المترجم بتاعنا. لما المترجم بتاعنا يجي على الاجتماع هنشغل الترجمة. هتشوفوا الايكون ده المحطوط هنا بالسهم الاحمر. اللي عايز يسمع الترجمة العربي يدوس الايكون ده ويختار عربي or Arabic. اللي عايز يسمع بالانجليزي يسمع عادي. Questions will be taken according to the way and pattern that we're used to, that we will have the questions by raising hand in the chat. And so if you'd like to ask a question at the end of the meeting, please raise your hand using the chat, and we will be taking questions that way. We see that our translator, Abu Maurice, is here. So while I set him up, I'll hand the floor over to our speaker, Dr. George. Thank you so much, Dr. George.
Thank you so much, Sabuna. Please absolve me. Absolve me, my fathers. Yes, thank you, and pray for me. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you this evening. And I think this subject, as you mentioned, Father Simon, is a relevant subject, pertinent subject to all of us as servants and as parents. So and I don't think we can contain this subject in the next 45, 50 minutes, but I'll do my best to give you as much as I can. And I do have some resources and references for you towards the end of the session. I will share with you some resources that may seem, that may be relevant and hopefully meaningful as well. How can we protect our children from this over-sexualized culture? And I assume that this culture that we live in is over-sexualized. There is a great emphasis on sex and sexuality. Of course, I think that you would all agree with me that everything now that we see in the media, whether in politics, wherever that is, all aspects and facets of society seem to have some kind of sexual images, connotations, messages, subtle and not so subtle. Needless to say, we live in a culture that is not just over-sexualized, but it does have a view of sexuality that is diametrically opposed to our biblical understanding of sex and sexuality. Now, consequently, what happens, this twisted cultural perspective exerts a huge influence on our children and also a huge challenge to us as servants and as parents. Now I'm going to use servants and parents interchangeably. I am assuming that, I'm not assuming, I know that all of us are servants and many of us are parents. So I'm going to use this term interchangeably as we speak. Our children, our teens, are constantly bombarded with sexual messages and imageries, on, like I said, TV, the internet, music, even billboards, let's say, TV sitcoms, reality shows. I just went and I did a quick survey. I surveyed some of our teens here in our church as what are the shows that are most attractive to teens nowadays, or the series. I hear, examples: The Secret Life of the American Teenager, Lucifer, Outer Banks. All these are TV shows and series. What do they revolve around? Sex and sexuality. This has become now the fashion and the trend. As this misguided and misinformation permeates the airwaves, it is no surprise to see that our children and some of the adults as well are confused about sex and sexuality. What is it? What's the truth behind all this? And we see staggering results. This overemphasis on sexuality in our culture is resulting in not very positive effects. Let me share with you some of these results. Pornography. And I'm going to spare you the statistics, but you'll see that pornography has been on the rise. 40 million Americans regularly visit pornography sites. 30% of all internet downloads are related to pornography, and so many other staggering statistics. Sexually transmitted disease, another result, another effect of this over-sexually saturated culture. Teen pregnancy, violence against women, sexual abuse of children, abortion. Traditional family has now become extinct. The movements of the rise of same-sex marriage, transgenderism, sex trafficking, and so on and so on and so on. If you see that the common theme and thread amongst all of these effects that I mentioned is an over-sexualized that gives this misinformation, misguidance on what it means or what is sex and what is sexuality. Now, this seems to me that it seems to stem from what I call an anthropological shift. And what do I mean by that? What is this anthropological shift that I am labeling as such? Our view to what it means to be human has fundamentally shifted and changed. Again, what do I mean? I'll give you some examples. The traditional understanding of human nature, it was that we are fundamentally religious creatures. It means that we agree on all religious ideals, but that the most important thing about humans is that the metaphysical search for meaning and purpose in life. That's what makes humans humans. For them to have this religious metaphysical aspect of their nature. In other words, humans are humans because they wrestled with the big questions of life, such as, where did we come from? What is the purpose of life? Who determines what is right and what is wrong? Where do we go when we die? These are the existential questions of life, and only human beings can actually wrestle and address and have answers to such questions. Today, people are seen as fundamentally sexual creatures, not metaphysical. You see, sexual identity has become human identity, while this identity has now shifted. We're no longer religious creatures. We are now sexual creatures. I identify myself with my sexual preference or my sexual orientation. Because of this shift, what happens? You'll see that the common reaction when someone publicly comes out as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or any of that, they are now able to be themselves. I am now becoming who I am. I am gay. I am lesbian. I am bisexual. I am transgender, and what have you. I have basically linked my identity to my sexuality. My identity comes from my sexuality. I do me, you do you. That's the common expression we hear now in our culture. In the meantime, those who hold religious convictions and ideals must be kept private and out of the public sphere. Religious beliefs are now relegated to the realm of the personal and the private. But sexual choices are now celebrated, promoted, and they have now become self-defining. They're enshrined. They are who I am. This is what I call an anthropological shift that has taken place in the last decade or two. Now, just to reiterate, this shift is seeing people as is basically shifting from seeing people as religious creatures to sexual creatures. That shift gave or provided a fertile ground in which cases like same-sex marriage, homosexuality, and transgenderism have flourished. This is why we wrestle with these phenomena that we haven't really wrestled as much in past decades. So we need to understand the root cause, what's going on. And I will explain to you all what the problem is, but I'm not going to leave you with just here's the problem. Of course, I will provide as much as I can some practical tips that will help us deal with this problem, and more importantly, protect our children from this avalanche of what they call sexual freedom or the sexual revolution that began in the late 60s, 70s, and it's now coming on in our era as we speak. I also believe that not only do we see and witness an anthropological shift, but I believe that these are symptoms of a deeper problem. And if I were to label this problem with just one cause for this effect, I would say moral depravity. I believe that this over-sexualized culture is a deeper spiritual problem that has an appetite that cannot be quenched, that cannot be fulfilled. The real problem is not so much physical, but spiritual. We believe that we can fulfill and satisfy our needs with what we can do with this over-sexualized culture of ours, not knowing that this will leave us wanting for more and actually more emptier than when we were before. So what do? We see that everything around us revolves around, even comedy shows. I remember when we used to watch, for example, the Cosby Show or some of the old traditional shows on television, there was humor, but it didn't revolve exclusively around sex and sexuality. You watch TV now and you'll see any show, any sitcom, any reality show, there's always, you'll see hints, some subtle, some not so subtle, some in your face and some not so much in your face around sex and sexuality. Comedy revolves around sexual humor. What happened? Again, back to this anthropological shift that we are now sexual creatures, not so much metaphysical creatures. What do? How can we educate our children and protect our children as parents and as servants from this avalanche? What do? I have some practical suggestions and practical tips that I want to share with you. Precisely, how many do I have? 12. Go over each. I want to caution all of you in avoiding two extremes that our children are exposed to. What are these two extremes? It seems like two conflicting worldviews. On one extreme, on one end, sex seems to be the most important thing in life. It is the goal of almost everything we do. It's you know, how we dress, how we groom ourselves, how we present ourselves to other people seems to be so that we can be considered as sexually attractive. Now I'm talking about teens and youth. You know, it seems to be the cornerstone of our existence, and the media around us and the culture around us promotes that perspective. That's one extreme. Now, an opposite but equally destructive message suggests that sex is shameful, it's dirty, it's sinful, it is not to be discussed, it's bad. That's another extreme. Both extremes have destructive consequences. Our children are exposed to these both extremes. In the world they live in, sex is promoted. Well, they go to church and maybe they get some hints and teachings from ultra conservative people that say sex is not to be discussed. It's shameful, it's sinful, it's bad. Well, what is it? Is it this extreme or that extreme? What is the biblical understanding? What is the biblical perspective of sexuality that we can teach our children so that they can have this fulfilled, satisfied life? With that said, again, needless to say, parents have a huge responsibility. It all begins at home. Parents have a huge responsibility. They are the most powerful influence in their child's life, whether you like or not. You are, as a parent, the most powerful influence on your child's life. Even when your child seems to be not listening, not paying attention, they are influenced by what you say and what you do. Well, that poses a challenge. Are we equipped as parents to discuss matters of sex and sexuality to our children? Because we all know that you cannot give what you don't have. You know, in Arabic, faqad ash-shay' la yu'ti. So if I don't have enough knowledge, equipping, understanding, educating about sexuality, how am I going to transmit or convey this biblically to my children? And this is when I say that servants and parents, and again, I'm using this interchangeably, but we must work together so that we can have sessions not so much directed towards the youth or our teens and our kids, but more importantly towards us as parents and servants. What do we do? How do we navigate these rough waters of, this over-sexualized trend in our culture so that we can raise children that have the proper perspective on sexuality that is biblically founded and churchly guided? That is what we aim to do. So with that, I will give you, we can speak about this subject for many and many hours, but again, just in the interest of time, I'll try to summarize as much as I can so that we can have some, at least a quick roadmap, some guidance, so that we can further protect our children from the culture we live in. Here are some 12 points or principles, I would say, or strategies to keep in mind. Number one, we must build a relationship with our children. I think it goes without saying. You cannot communicate without building a relationship. You can't. Whatever you say will go in one ear, out the other ear. So you must build a relationship. Now that begs another question. How do I build the relationship with my son or my daughter? There's one most effective way in building a relationship with my son or daughter. That is to enter into their world. To enter into their world. You want to connect with them and have a meaningful conversation? You have to enter into their world. Find out, their current interests, their passions, what they love to do, what they don't like to do, and be part of their world. Talk with them, listen to them. This is how you build the relationship. You cannot go any further if all you do as a parent to your child is to lecture, lecture, lecture. As a matter of fact, many parents will say, many children will mock their parents and say, hey, I heard this lecture before. They will name them. This is lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, because I heard it before. And the moment you speak lecturing, or the moment you open your mouth lecturing, this is the moment they close their ears and their mind. So as parents, we don't lecture, we talk by listening and entering into the child's world. This is how you can communicate, and this is how you can build the relationship. Second strategy, after you've built this relationship, you need to focus on character traits. So you need to tie your discussion about sex and sexuality to bigger issues such as honesty, holiness, morality, loyalty, self-control, all of these character traits, because they are very closely tied to their perspective on sexuality. For example, how do I wait until marriage to have sex if I don't have self-control? So what's more important, to tell your child that you should not have premarital sex because this is a sin, or to infuse them with self-control? With self-control, they can achieve this holiness and purity that will take them through marriage. Honesty. Well, if I'm not honest, I may lie to you as my parent or my servant about my sexual activity. Respect, love, and so on and so forth. Sacrifice, and so on. All of these important character traits are the foundation that we should lay before we talk about anything with sexuality with our children. So number 1, build the relationship by entering into their world. Number 2, always focus on character traits and tie your conversation about sexuality with character traits. Number 3, model a godly view of sexuality. Because as I said, kids, and this is a proven phenomena, these kids will learn from you without you even speaking. Will learn from how you react.
Forgive me, beloved. It seems that Dr. George was disconnected.
Am I back?
You are back now.
Okay, I am sorry. I don't know what happened.
No problem.
All right, forgive me. All right, so I think we finished the second one, and we're with modeling a godly view of sexuality, or biblical view of sexuality. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. So So we need to teach our children the godly, biblical, proper view of, and if it's kept within the context of marriage, then what will happen? It will promote the fulfillment we're looking for on every level: physical fulfillment, emotional fulfillment, spiritual fulfillment. So we need to infuse our children with what is God's design for sexuality, without shame, without embarrassment, without any of that. Because let me tell you, if you don't, someone will. Either the media, their friends, or anything, or someone else will tell them, will convey to them the message. I would much rather be the one telling my children the biblical perspective, God's plan on sexuality, than to have them hear it from a friend or see it on TV or read about it in a book or anything like that. Number 4, we need to, as parents and servants, reflect on our own attitudes, and that's very important, extremely important. We need to think and have this self-introspection and ask ourselves, do I feel inhibited when talking about this subject? Do I harbor any feelings that sex is bad or disapproved by God or shameful or dirty? Do I have any of these feelings or sentiments? I need to acknowledge these misconceptions and resolve them and work around them. As I said, I am teaching my child the proper biblical perspective on sex. I need to know what that is first, because I may be actually having some issues myself as a parent. Maybe from my childhood, I was told and taught, never open this subject, the S word. This is bad, it's dirty, it's shameful, I get embarrassed. Well, that cannot be the case in today's world. That cannot be. And if we harbor any of these feelings, like I said, we need to work around them, resolve them, and educate our children properly. Number 5, I need to talk honestly and frequently with my child. What do I mean by honestly and frequently? Well, frequently, I cannot tell my child everything I know about sexuality during one single intense session. Give them everything I need, they need to know in one evening. Now, details should be given gradually over many conversations. You must grow as your child grows. Over a period of years, I can tell them that much when they are 4, 5, 6 years old. I can tell them that much more when they become, in their pre-adolescent years in middle school. I can tell them that much when they're in high school, and so on. I cannot just tell them everything all at once. And as I mentioned before, I will keep mentioning this, is that our culture does not allow us the luxury of just not talking to them because I feel shameful or embarrassed or anything like that. Because if we don't, someone else will. So talk honestly, transparently, and frequently to your child. Do not wait until they come and ask you questions. Instigate, initiate the conversation, but of course be equipped to provide a biblical perspective on sexuality. And before I go to number 6, I can summarize this biblical perspective with an analogy, because as you talk to your child, they will listen to you when you give them analogies or stories. Here's an analogy that I came up with, and I thought it was a very relevant analogy on God's design for sex within the context of marriage. Here's the analogy. I give them a picture of someone enjoying in a cold winter night evening, enjoying the fire in the fireplace. What does the fire provide as long as it is in the fireplace? It provides warmth. on a cold winter night, because the fire is supposed to be in the fireplace for it to provide warmth. Take this fire outside of the fireplace. What will happen to your house? It will burn down. What do I mean by that? Fire is good. Sexuality is good. It's a gift from God, as long as it is in the context of marriage. Fire is good as long as it is in the context of the fireplace. You take sexuality outside the context of marriage, you're asking to be burned in so many different ways, just like the fire outside the fireplace. Give them this analogy. Let them think about it. Talk again honestly and frequently. Number 6, we again as parents and servants need to admit ignorance. We're not experts on every single subject about sex and sexuality. We don't know. I don't know, although I personally, with my psychology background, I did study human sexuality for almost a year and a half, but I'm not the expert on sexuality. So sometimes I have questions I don't know the answers for. So what do? I admit my ignorance and say to my child, let's find out, but let's go to resources that are respected and trusted resources. And it's totally okay to say to your child, I don't know, but let's find out together. Number 7, so let's review real quick. We said build a relationship by entering into their world. Focus on the bigger issues in life, the character traits, and tie your sex conversation with the character traits. Number 3, you need to model and you need to exemplify godly view, biblical view of sexuality, talking and acting. Reflect on your own attitude. That's number 4. See if you personally have some unresolved issues from your childhood about sexuality, and you're basically passing that down to your child and doing them more harm. Number 5, talk honestly, transparently, and frequently to your child. Give them what they need to know in the right stage of their development. Number 6, admit your ignorance, and it's not shameful to say I don't know, even though some of us may find it difficult to say I don't know. It's actually you'll gain credibility in your child's eyes when you say I don't know, rather than just give them any answer. Number 7, believe in your child. Infuse confidence in your child. Help them with their confidence and self-control. Do not assume that your child is incapable of resisting temptations. And we all heard this many times. I'll tell you, and I'm sure many of you have heard this before. I trust you, I just don't trust her. I trust you, I don't trust him. We all say that. We've all parents have said that. Well, you know what? You need to continue to infuse that trust in your child. And you need to, instead of saying, I don't think you can resist this temptation, equip them with knowledge and confidence. Watch from a distance and see how they can manage a situation, and praise them for basically, being successful in managing that difficult situation. Because you know what? You don't have this child with you for the rest of their lives. Eventually, they're going to go off to college. They're going to be in this mode of, sink or swim. So what do? While I have him or her under my roof, I infuse them with knowledge, confidence, and self-control. That's what I infuse them with, so that they can make these decisions on their own as they mature and leave. Number 8, be inviting. Be inviting. What do I mean? Urge your child to ask anything they want to ask, and thank them when they do. You need to, as a parent, to foster an open, free environment where your child can ask anything, and let them know that there's no topic that's off limits. Ask me anything, talk about anything, and do not overreact when they ask something that's, you know, maybe embarrassing to you or shameful to you. You have to have this open door policy, be inviting, have them come to you. But that depends upon what? About, not, you know, on number one, as I mentioned to you, building that relationship, becoming more their friends rather than lecturer, but more than their confidant, their friends who can actually have a conversation with your child. One thing I also say about that is, as a parent, ask yourself this question: how does my child see me? Someone who always gives them instructions, then my child would not want to be with me all the time, because I am the instruction giver all the time. What does mom and dad do all the time? They give me instructions. Do and don't. Don't do this, do that. We use every single moment as a teachable moment to our children. That is not healthy. Or some other times, mom and dad, all they talk about is church, agbiya, the Bible, tasbihah, and this is all they talk about. I'm not saying this is bad. But if this is all you talk about with your child, then your child is going to build that barrier, that wall. Well, why can't I just be your friend? Why don't we just go out and play? My child is consumed with Fortnite. Well, why can I just not see, you know, what he does with Fortnite? Maybe praise him. Of course, you have to put limits on screen time and all of that. That goes without saying. But what I mean to say is, enter into their world, speak their language, be their friends, rather than be the one that always says, don't do this, do this. Why haven't you done that? Why haven't you done this? If this is all you do, I don't think your child is going to listen to you for long. Play with them, enter into their world, speak their language. Let's watch something on TV as long as it's appropriate and decent. Let's watch something on TV together. It doesn't have to be the Passion of the Christ. It doesn't have to be something that is always religious. But with wisdom, you can infuse some spiritual sense into them, into their world, by being their friend. That's how I can build the community, build the relationship with my child. Anyways, let's move on. Number 9, look for teaching opportunities and use them. Talk about this provocative commercial you saw together. And of course, you don't have to look for long. You can just wait for a few minutes. You'll see a commercial that now commercials, I don't know if this is in the Southern Diocese as well, but I live in San Francisco, and most commercials now, they don't have the traditional family commercials anymore. It's either 2 women or 2 men that have children and family. Anyways, let's look at this commercial and use this commercial as a moment to have a conversation with my child. Hey, what do you think about that? What do you think? What's the definition of a family to you? What does love mean to you? What's your understanding of sexuality? What do you think of transgenderism? Transgenderism, by the way, is now the maybe another subject we can have a conversation around. This is a huge subject we can discuss. What do you think of same-sex marriage? What's the effect of same-sex marriage on culture? I mean, does it? And ask those questions, but be equipped to provide biblical, rational responses to these questions. All right, number 10. I think I mentioned number 10 already. Do not overreact. Make your home the child preferred place to have conversation about sexuality. Don't overreact. No matter what they say, be inviting, be open, foster this open, free discourse and conversation policy. Number 11, which is extremely important. Number 11 is extremely important. Teach your child about friendship and boundaries. Here's the key word, boundaries. How can I develop good friendships that are non-romantic? مش كل friendship has to lead into some romance or something like. I can have a friendship that is non-romantic. How can I see a genuine friendship in my world? That's how to develop friendships. More importantly, how to have boundaries in my friendships. We must set or help our children set boundaries in their life in general, especially with the outside world. Boundaries, my friends, my fathers, do two things. Boundaries do two important things. If you look, here's an analogy. Just like the fireplace analogy, I'll give you another analogy. Let's walk around and look at a house that has a fence around it. And you ask your child, and let them speak and respond. Why does this house has this fence around it? The first reaction or the first response will be to protect this house. I said, perfect. Boundaries protect us, but boundaries do something else. Boundaries define us. Just like this fence tells the entire neighborhood where this house begins, where this house ends. So it defines where this house begins, where this house ends. Just like boundaries for me, they define where I begin and where you end. So there is a boundary that makes my soul, my heart define as to who I really am by this definition. And likewise, as I said, it protects my heart, my soul, and my body. So teach your children how to set proper boundaries. It is extremely important. Boundaries with their friends, boundaries with their colleagues, with even their relatives. There's got to be boundaries in every relationship they have. Number 12, and the last strategy or principle I share with you, and that goes without saying again, is to love your child unconditionally, no matter what they do. Even if they come to you with the worst mistake they made or said or thought, I continue to love you. Even if deep down you think, how dare you do that? Whenever you have this feeling, read Luke chapter 15. Whenever you have this feeling of, I can't believe my child would do that, read Luke chapter 15. It's the parable of the prodigal son. And remember that you are to love your child unconditionally because God loves you and I unconditionally. And that love is the safe haven that your child needs to be able to get back up if they fall down. They're not going to go somewhere else. You are the one who is going to help them get back up. Let's review those 12 principles. There are more, a lot more, but again, in the interest of time, and I don't want to belabor this subject too much, I just wanted to give you 12 strategies that will help us as parents, as servants, in equipping our children on how to deal with this over-sexualized culture of ours. Number one, build a relationship, enter into their world and communicate with them. Do not be a constant lecturer, but be a constant friend. Number two, focus on character traits, holiness, self-control, morality, truth, honesty, and so on. Number three, you yourself as a parent and as a servant, you need to model a godly, biblical view of sexuality and teach them the Christian worldview of sex. Number four, look within yourself and reflect on your own misconceptions, your own attitudes about sexuality. And if you have something you need to resolve, work on that before you can convey the biblical perspective to your child. Number five, talk honestly and frequently. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's something that you do over a period of years. Admit your ignorance. Number six, if you're asked a question that you don't have an answer for. Number seven, believe in your child and infuse them with confidence and self-control. Number eight, be inviting. Have them always come to you with questions and have this open door policy when you talk to your child. Number 9, look for teaching opportunities and use them constructively with analogies, with stories, with communication. Number 10, do not overreact. Maybe we can include 8 and 10 together. Be inviting and do not overreact. Number 11, teach your child about friendships and what it means to have a friend and to be a friend, and also teach them the importance of boundaries. With every relationship your child has, boundaries are essential to continue having this fruitful relationship. And number 12, love your child unconditionally, no matter what he or she does. Last thing I want to share with you, and I think I'm running out of time, but if you just give me 5 more minutes. Abuna, do I have 5 more minutes to continue? And then maybe you will...
Yes, of course, this would be wonderful.
Okay, just 5 minutes, Malish. And I'm speaking quickly because I have so much I want to share with you. So just one last subject I wanted to mention. We're talking about the over-sexualized culture. We discussed the anthropological shift and how now sexual identity becomes my identity. We've also talked about equipping the parents and the servants with some strategies. I must discuss lastly sexual abuse. Sexual abuse, which has been on the rise. I'm not going to give you the statistics. You can look that up on Google. But there's alarming sexual violence statistics in our culture. I'll spare you the statistics. But there are several factors that contributed to this epidemic of sexual abuse. This over-sexualized culture, number 1, of our, the society, how it's now revolving around sex in every aspect of the society, especially in the media. Number 2, the moral breakdown of our, basically, our moral breakdown, our moral depravity that we see. And number 3, the fact that our children now have access to people outside their home like never before. With their, with their cell phone, they can now be in contact with people within their community and outside their community. So we need to obviously arm our children not to be victims of sexual abuse. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommended the following steps. I added a couple, and then we'll end with that. Number 1, we need to, and again, back to the 12 principles, we need to constantly, frequently engage with our children about sexual abuse. What does it mean? Teach them which body parts are to be, kept private, and so on and so forth, with complete transparency and honestly and frequency. And we need to listen. Number 2, listen carefully to what they want to say, but maybe they can't say. And number 3, learn or teach your child, or let your child know that you'll never be angry with them if they tell you something that happened to them either in the past or in the present. So we need to have this constant communication with our children on how to avoid and not to be victims by sexual abuse. And there's a lot more to be said about this subject, but I will suffice with that. As I promised you in the beginning, I have some references for you. So let me share my screen because I don't want to just give you some principles without giving you some references. I personally believe, being a parent myself to 2 boys, this subject, my dear fathers and dear friends, is extremely, extremely important to continue to delve into. So let me just share with you my screen and share with you the resources I would like to send you all. Here they are. All right. I do have my wife and I, and we're both, by the way, children of His Grace Bishop Youssef. We had, and my wife is she does, she's in the medical field, physician. So she had sex education presentation to the girls, and I had a sex education presentation to the boys, ages 7, 8, and 9. I think 7, 8, and 9, and 10, 11, 12. I would love to share those presentations with you. And I will share with you very briefly. If you just give me a second, I'll share my screen. Okay, I trust you can all see my screen. So this is family life education from a Christian perspective. I think it's about 21 slides. It goes into the biology, and it goes into basically sex education. I am sure you all have your own curriculums and topics to discuss regarding sex education, but this could be just a reference that may be of assistance and of help. The other thing I want to share with you is I'm assuming you can still see my screen.
No, the share screen stopped, Dr. George.
Okay, well, maybe I hope you can see it now.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is for the boys, obviously, and it's recommended, as you all know, that a female servant would serve the young girls, and a male teacher will serve the young boys, learning about sex. What is it? Why did God create it? God designed it for marriage, and here's the fence around the pool. Of course, some analogies that will help illustrate the idea. Our body, what's our understanding of sex, what's puberty, how should I treat my body, how should I see girls' bodies, are boys better than girls, and society's view on sex, and so on and so forth. I think it maybe you can find it useful, and you can use it as a reference. The other things I want to share with you are two websites that provide Christian views, or reviews rather, on every single TV show or movie. One is called pluggedin.com. This is sponsored by Focus on the Family. The other one is Common Sense Media. Let me put these in the chat so that you can have them. So let's say, for example, there's a movie. It's movie night tonight, family movie night. The kids want to watch a movie with mom and dad. Great. Well, how can we? How do we know what's good, what's bad, and don't go by the rating, because now PG-13 is very different from what PG-13 was 10 years ago. But let me just share with you these in the chat to everyone. Here you go. commonsensemedia.org, pluggedin.com, TV reviews. So if you ever have a question on should I watch this show or not, these websites will give you a detailed review from a Christian perspective, what's included and what's not. And Irini, thank you for affirming that you love Common Sense Media for checking out a movie. They do actually have a good, so you all know the resources, but those of you who didn't, Common Sense Media and Plugged In are two good references. And I will share with Otsabuna, Father Simon, I will share with you the two presentations that my wife and I had given years back, and you can feel free to send it to all. With that, I took a little bit more time than I was allotted, but once again, this subject is extremely important for us as parents and servants. I hope that I had given you at least some tips and tricks and highlighted the problem and the issue, and of course, with the grace of God and the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives, we'll be able to protect not our children, but we'll be able to protect His children. Glory and honor be to God forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Dr. George, for sharing with us.
I'm sorry, Abuna, to interrupt you. Can you just address me as George? There's no need for
I'm
George.
Now, learning from you, we want to make sure that we're respectful of your boundaries. I know there are some questions, but we want to be respectful of your boundaries and your time. Are you available to answer a few questions?
Yes, of course. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. So I'll remind those that have questions, if you please raise your hands in the chat, and I'll unmute you. George, we'll keep going until you tell us that it's time to stop. So please, Yanni, don't be bashful if you need to tell us that we need to take the last question or whatever it is. So that we're respectful of your time. Christine McCary.
Hi, can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, my daughter, she's in the last year at elementary school, and she's going after like few months to middle school. And there's a group of girls at her school, in elementary school. It's hurting her mentally. They always speaking about sex stuff, and every day she come home upset and mad and angry because they always speak about dirty stuff, and everything they see, they turn it to dirty imagination. How I can protect my kid to be healthy, mentally healthy, and not losing her spiritual?
Yes, excellent question. And unfortunate, but this is the reality. Yes. The good thing that you just mentioned in your question, that she comes home dissatisfied with what she hears from her friends. That's a great thing. And not only that, there's another good thing. So let's focus on the positives here. She's not happy with what she's listening to or getting from her friends. Secondly, how do you know? She must have told you. So the second good thing is that she's telling you, which means that you have a very good relationship with her. So build on these two positive things. It seems, we are going against the tide. Pretend that there's an avalanche that's coming towards you, like a tsunami that's coming towards you. You have to swim against this avalanche. This tide of the culture that we live in must be countered with education, communication, the Christian worldview on sexuality. Keep feeding her the proper perspective so that you can have this balance. Yes, she will get those. And by the way, she gets them now, whatever dirty talk and whatever. She will continue to get that as, this is the culture we live in. This is the world we live in. The only thing I would suggest for you to do is to build on the positives, that she's dissatisfied, she's open with you, and to continue relentlessly talking with her on the Christian worldview and the proper worldview on sexuality. Give her the analogy of the fireplace, give her the analogy of the fence, and so on and so forth. But also, as you discuss with her, let her speak and have this kind of two-way conversation rather than just me talking to you. That's the only thing we can do. You cannot raise your child in a bubble. Can't do that anymore. I have a principle that I think is extremely important. Inoculate, do not isolate. You cannot isolate your child from society, but you can inoculate vaccinate. Here's a key word now we use every day. Vaccinate against this culture. وربنا معاك.
Ayman Kamil.
Salam ya Abay. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Dr. George, for educating us and listening to us. Two very quick questions, and I'm going to ask them as a servant more than a parent. I want to ask how dangerous it is to leave these very sensitive topics for different servants in a church, that everyone can put his own input and his own idea in these topics. The kids can hear different idea and input year after year, and we can lose capability of having these kids to believe us and believe what we believe about these sensitive topics. And also, going back to number 8, to be accepted or inviting to their questions. Can we accept these questions from our kids in Sunday school, even though if they are outside of the curriculum? Thank you, Dr. George.
Excellent questions. The first question, the presentations, and not only not that's the content, the delivery. Whoever is giving those presentations and conveying this knowledge to the children cannot be just someone who's not equipped. You have to have someone who's grounded, anchored in what is the proper biblical perspective on sexuality. Preferably someone with an academic background and a biblical background together. because I cannot give you my own opinion and input. I would actually be doing a lot more harm than good. I may actually be really hurting more than helping. So there's got to be, some kind of oversight. What is it that we're sharing as far as content? You cannot share too much or too little. There's got to be the right content at the right stage. And how do I share this content, and from what perspective? So there's got to be, like training the trainer. So there's got to be like the pre-servants meetings or sessions and curriculums. There's got to be experts in the field of sexuality and the biblical perspective. I cannot teach my own opinion. That's number one. Number two, if the child asks a question, about sexuality, or one of those also labeled as embarrassing questions, although they should not be embarrassing, I should definitely address the question. And if it's not, again, with wisdom, depending on what's the context and what's the, who's present, who's not, what kind of question. But I cannot, if I don't address the question immediately, I must address the question at least privately with the child. This is how we can let them speak up. I'll tell you one thing, they may be asking this question in the class because they're embarrassed to ask this question at home. So what do you do as a servant? You are bridging this gap between church and home. And maybe you can have a conversation with mom and dad. Hey, by the way, your son or your daughter asked, such question. I think it's important to have an honest conversation. This is what I think you should say. So my advice is to never shun any question aside and say this is not appropriate or this is out of context. It's good that they're asking questions like that.
Before we move to the next question, a few people have asked if they can ask questions anonymously. Just to be able to manage this, if you have a question you'd like to ask anonymously, please in the chat send it to Abuna Jerome Maximos, Father Jerome Maximos. He'll receive the questions anonymously. He'll keep them anonymous, and he will ask those questions that we receive anonymously directly to George. Until there are some questions from Abuna Jerome, and Abuna, perhaps if Utsek gets an anonymous question, I can ask your reverence to raise your hand in the chat as well, and then we can address the anonymous questions. Next is Yvette Iskandar.
Thank you, Abuna, and thank you so much, Dr. George. I just have a quick question. You mentioned that, as us humans and children, we all wrestle with a lot of questions in life. The question I have does not really pertain to sexuality, more pertaining to the faith of our children. And I'm sure you've seen it so much, our children, they leave the church as they get older. And the percentage gets more and more and more. And sometimes even when they're not physically leaving the church, they're mentally already kind of forgive me for using the word, but checking out.
Absolutely.
And it's becoming younger and younger. So my question is, and I hope I'm not taking too much, it wouldn't take too much time from this specific focus of sexuality. But my question is, how us as parents and servants can possibly set up a program or something separate from Sunday school to target the middle schoolers right now, that it will be not more of if you have ideas or a program set up that can focus on this and this, it's not like sermon, but open discussion, and a program that we can focus on building a structure as Sunday school servants and parents to be on the right track. To have some sort of I know our kids are exposed to Sunday school as all lessons and all stories, and that's what they keep hearing, stories. But how can we start doing some apologetic training for our children? Basically, that's my question. I want to be able, do you have a program like that? Or do you have some sort of a structure that maybe we can work on? And I'm hoping if we can start just with middle schooler, as they grow old, we can catch them before they hit high school. Yes. And maybe in the long run, if God is willing and we're able to form something with your guidance and your knowledge.
Yeah. What a wonderful question, and thank you for raising this question. And boy, do we need apologetics training, I think, more than ever. We need apologetics training, not just middle school, even before middle school, and in middle school and in high school and in college. I cannot emphasize enough the need to have apologetics, curriculums and training. This is the reason, actually, the primary reason why I, through the grace of God and the guidance of His Grace Bishop Youssef, that I wrote the Timeless Truth and Truthless Times book to serve as, conversation starter, basically. I do have some resources. I'll be more than happy to share them with you. Again, I can share them with Abuna Seraphim. You can share them with I'm sorry, did I say Seraphim? Forgive me.
No problem. Share them with any of the fathers. We'll get them out. Perfect.
Either Father Jerome, Father Simon. Forgive me, Abuna. I can share them with you, and I have some documents. I have some websites that, again, designed for elementary, middle school, and high school. What is it, like the subject of sexuality? What is it? Do we share in that stage in their development, and some scenarios, some questions, and so on and so forth. I'll be more than happy to share with you some resources. But to your point, initially you said a lot of youth are, there's this mass exodus, they're leaving the church, and they've checked out, as you said. True, very true, and very sad. And do you know what is the #1 reason why they do so? At least when I ask them, and I'm talking youth, not just in the US, youth in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, everywhere. There's one common reason why they do that. It's because they have questions, and they go ask their servants, forgive me, but they go ask their servants, and they don't get intellectually satisfying answers to their questions. Because we need, as servants, to be equipped more and more and more, and educate ourselves so that we can provide answers to their questions. We can't have faith-based answers to their fact-based questions. So we have to talk to them at the same level. I am not saying that every single question can be addressed intellectually. Of course not, because some things are spiritually discerned, as St. Paul said. But there are answers that we can provide to intellectually satisfy their curiosity. And we need to learn these answers, be equipped, so they don't go off and hear those answers from their college professors that sound far more credible, and then they leave the church and they say, oh, the church is bankrupt as far as providing me with reasonable and rational answers. So your question is spot on.
Thank you. I see Abuna Jerome has one of the anonymous questions, so I'll ask Abuna Jerome.
Thank you, Abuna.
I miss you, Abuna Jerome, by the way. It's good,
hi,
good
George,
to hear your voice.
You too, George. Thanks for what you do. George, we have a question from Imam. She says, how can I build a relationship with my 16-year-old boy who is almost always disrespectful and rude to me since he started his teenage years? We had great relationship before. I invested time and energy with him since he was born. I raised him well to the best of my knowledge, read the Bible with him, modeled Christian behavior to him, played and had fun with him, etc.
Yeah, I hear this question. I do have a 16-year-old boy as well, so I can relate. I'll tell you, sometimes as parents, it is extremely important for us to our children respect us. I'm not disagreeing with that, but I want you to look at things a little bit differently. As a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, even 17-year-old, your child is going through turmoil in his life. He's going through so much. identity crisis, basically a struggle in who he is and what he wants to do, and not to mention the physical changes, the hormonal changes, all kind of changes, puberty and all of that. Your child is struggling. And I'm not giving him an excuse to be disrespectful to you, absolutely not. But I want you to look at it from that perspective. He's struggling. He needs you to be his support. I don't want you to take things personally. As a mom, I am due my respect. He's supposed to obey me. I want you to shift that perspective a little bit. And I want you to empathize with him more. Be there for him more. He said something that is out of line, maybe out of anger, out of, normal, typical teenage, crazy stuff. I mean, ibla'iha, you know what I mean? Like, let it go, and let it go. It's important for parents to not to take things so personally, knowing that my child is going through very, very difficult stages in his life. That's number one. That will help you not take things personally, and that will help your child feel that mom is not always on my case, making my life, which is already harder and more difficult. I am there to support you. There's a line that you need to draw. Respect is expected, but I think as a parent, and in this day and age, you need to come to your child, empathize with him a little bit more, and he will in turn begin to appreciate you and respect you. I am giving you, by the way, a very general answer, because a question like that has multiple factors that need to be understood. The environment, the financial situation, the struggles at home. There's a lot of factors involved. I'm giving you a general question for a specific. I'm sorry, a general answer for a specific question.
Thank you very much. Gaudet and Miriam Wasser.
Thank you so much, Dr. George, for your time. When we talk to our children about that homosexuality is wrong from the Bible, and we mentioned Leviticus and what St. Paul talked about in his epistles, if we say that this is a sin, and the Bible says it clearly, but if I wanted to give them a definition, it's a sin against our inner being. If I wanted to just put especially if they wanted to explain it to their friends, because a lot of their friends, they're okay with it. But if we wanted to explain it from outside the Bible, or just I want to put my hands on a definition that I can tell them.
Perfect. The subject of homosexuality, I was afraid someone will ask this question, because this can just be could be a can of worms. Yes, here is just a question, not a biblical question, a logical question that I would say for you to use as a response. You as a your friend or your son's friend or daughter's friend they're not Christians. So you say that, what is your explanation of homosexuality? Typically they will say it's natural. Homosexuality is natural. I pause and I say, well, listen to me. I would like to entertain this thought with you. You say that homosexuality is natural. Now, why then would nature give a man sexual organs that are compatible with the woman's sexual organs, and you say that homosexuality is natural? Are you saying that nature is confused? Why then did it not give the man the same sexual organs that it gave the woman, so that a man can have sex with another man with compatibility? Why then did nature do that? Is it confused or is it not? And if it didn't do that, that maybe homosexuality is not natural. Maybe it's against nature, and we want to make it natural with our own moral depravity. So a question like that, I mean, forgive me for being too graphic, but I think you need to be explicit with that question. It can be natural because, you know, their organs are not compatible, and you don't have to explain further. I think they will get the point. I hope that helps.
Thank you, George. For those that are interested in the science of homosexuality, there's a book, George, I'm sure you know about it. It's a book by two authors, N.E. and B.K. Whitehead. The book is called My Genes Made Me Do It, Homosexuality and the Scientific Evidence. It goes through about 10,000 studies that were done for a period of 10 or 20 years and compiles all of the science that was done. This was published in the early to mid 2000s. But this book goes through in great detail, medically, scientifically, all of the kind of arguments as to how homosexuality is argued to be a natural phenomena, and goes through, you know, what are the possibilities based on the science. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll put the name of the book and the authors in the chat as well for those that are interested in that.
Excellent. And I just wanted to respond to someone asked me privately, I'm not going to mention their names, if they can connect with me offline. I'll be more than happy to. You can, I have a public Facebook page, and I use it for the ministry, again, under George Bassilios. So you can follow, you can, message me on my Facebook page, and I'll be more than happy to connect with you offline. My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Sabuna, for this book. Indeed, it's the scientific background of this book gives it a lot of credence. So it's a great book. Yeah. So thank you for suggesting it.
Thank you. Mina Khalil. Mina, are you available? Okay. Benjamin Segai.
Hello, Father and Dr. George. Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, Dr. George, my question is, you talk about defense and how you can protect, and it could be within also the content, the right when you speak to your children, to give them the right amount, if per se, if you want to say that. But my question is, how could you start? Because if you never had discussion in detail and your kids are like 15, 16, you don't want to be too late, but you want to start the conversation. How could you start the conversation? I mean, in my example, in my own personal experience, they always go to church. We talk about what the Bible say about marriage and what's gay and lesbian, what's the difference, and it's not wrong. It's wrong. But how can you start telling them you cannot have sex until you get married? And what you see in school, it's wrong. How can you jump to that specific conversation?
Sure, good question. Thank you for asking this question. First and foremost, it's better late than never. So it's good if you want to start the conversation when they're 15, 16. My advice is not so much to feed them and instruct them. I think at that age, at 15, when they have developed some, principles on their own, hopefully not very different from the principles you taught them, but ask them questions, because what you need to do to have an effective conversation or an effective communication, it's got to be based on a foundation of understanding. So I need to understand What do they believe in? Where are they coming from as far as love, sex, homosexuality, same-sex marriage? So I need to know what they believe in so that I can have a meaningful conversation. How do I do that? Ask them questions and use the right moment, the right setting. Go out to lunch with your child and say, just, hey, listen, I just wanted to pick your brain. What do you think about this and that? I'd like to know what you think. But be prepared to counter what they say, again, appropriately, biblically. And if it's out of balance, make sure you balance that out. But I would begin by asking them questions so that you can understand them, so that you can have a meaningful conversation.
So we have one final question, if it's okay, George.
Yes, that would be actually perfect. Yes.
Okay. Ologia Buktur.
Thank you, Dr. George, for this lecture. Thank you, my fathers. I want to talk about the age 14 and up as a mom and as a servant too. Some of them, they are they know now what is sexuality, what homosexuality, and some of them are mature, but we find now that their language has this sexual words or sexual language in their fun together when they are angry, having fun, their songs, the movies or the shows, as you said. And when you talk to them, they just say it's not a curse, it's not an insult, it's just normal. So there is a way to convince them that's not normal to have this language, or this will go by age, as long we, like as you said, we vaccinate them when they were little kids. Even we started to see it with the young servants, the language they cannot control. It's now normal to use these sexual words in their conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question, and I see your point, and it's again, it's sad that we have been desensitized. Even when we watch something on television, some words that are apparently not very pure and clean have become just now part of the plot, part of the conversation. I see your point. Here's a principle. I would say, and again, I'm giving you a general response to your question. Let your child come to this understanding that your language reflects who you are, but let them be convicted with this principle, that what you say is a joke. Oh, mom, it's just a joke. Oh, it doesn't mean anything. It's harmless. It's nothing. Well, let them know one way or another that your language reflects who you are. And of course, you can, you don't have to come up with the biblical verses that, you don't have to say any of that. You know that, I know that. They don't, but they need to understand that your language, not only your language, but the way you dress. This is the very initial impression that you present onto the world around you. So this is who you are. That's the first impression, how you dress and how you speak. If you want to be construed as someone who is, someone who has this filthy language in his vocabulary day in and day out, then that's what society will perceive you as such. But if you want to be mature, if you want to have substance in your conversations and be respected and have credibility in what you say, then you need to kind of clean up this language, because this language is what projects you to the outside world. So you can begin with that. Also, as you mature, you go to college, you get a degree, and you apply for a position. If you want to be, accepted in one of those respectful, companies and have a respectful position, your vocabulary will go a long way in determining whether you're accepted or not. So your vocabulary needs to be expanded, not to be exclusive on some, you know, not very clean words. Let them come to that realization themselves. But that's the only thing you can do. Again, it's unfortunate that this is the culture we live in. These words have become part of these words have become the air we breathe now. As a matter of fact, I'll end with that. When I went to Egypt to serve with Abuna Dawood Lam'i a couple of years ago, and to my surprise, the servant, and forgive me, I have to say this out loud. I shouldn't say this, but anyways, hopefully you don't put this in the recording. Some servants were actually using these words in Egypt, thinking that it's cool, you know, it's fashion to be able to use a couple of those words, thinking that now anyways, I don't want to dwell on that, but it's let them come to that conviction themselves. So with that, I just wanted to finally say I thank you for your time. This was helpful to me, your questions, your comments. I appreciate the opportunity to take your blessings, and of course, anything with His Grace Bishop Youssef, Bishop Basil, and Bishop Gregory, they're very dear to my heart, my fathers. So please, my fathers, send them my love and my greetings. And if you want to keep in touch and contact with me, you can connect with me on Facebook Messenger or email, and I will send Abuna, Father Simon, I will send you 2 presentations right now after I finish, and you can disseminate those presentations to everyone. Once again, keep me in your prayers, and thank you for this wonderful privilege and blessing.
Thank you so much, George. We really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom and your experience with us. I'll ask أبونا ميخائيل لو قدسك تصرفنا ناخد بركة قدسك.
Finally, O Lord, we thank you very much for this good opportunity and a lot of spiritual and mentally knowledge. Thank you for everything. We ask you, our Lord, to bless us, accept our prayers in the intercession of Saint Mary, the Mother of God, and the blessing of this holy resurrection. When you pray thankfully, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Some other father can let us go now. تفضل ابونا صرفنا.
أبونا إسحاق.
Now, the love of God the Father and only begotten Son, Lord Jesus Christ, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you. Go in peace, and the peace of God will be with you all.
With your spirit.
And with your spirit. All right. See you later, everyone.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you,